Colonel Potter, sir, my last wish is to be buried in my mother's wedding gown.
I've seen these Dodgers for 40 years, all the tricks. Dismissed!
MASH wasn't just a TV show, it was a television event. Week after week, millions tuned in to watch doctors and soldiers bring laughter and heartbreak from a war zone. It mixed comedy with deep emotional moments, and people connected with every character. But behind the scenes, things weren't always so smooth. Over the years, some fan-favorite actors suddenly disappeared, and not all of them left quietly. Some walked away for personal reasons. Others, well, it got a little messy. So what really happened? Why did they leave a show that was loved by millions? Join us as we look back at MASH and why some stars stepped away for good. A war show that wasn't just about war. When MASH first aired in 1972, no one expected it to become one of the biggest shows in TV history. It was set during the Korean War, but it wasn't your usual war drama. Instead of focusing on battles and soldiers in action, it told stories about the doctors and nurses working at a mobile hospital, the 4077th Mobile Army Surgical Hospital, to be exact. These were people trying to save lives in the middle of a war zone. And even though they were surrounded by danger, the show found a way to bring humor, kindness, and deep emotions into each episode. The idea for the show came from a 1970 movie called MASH, which itself was based on a book titled MASH, a novel about 3 Army doctors. When plans for a movie sequel didn't work out, the creators turned it into a TV series instead. Larry Gelbart led the way and gave the show its unique mix of comedy and drama. The series was made by 20th Century Fox Television and aired on CBS for 11 strong years, from 1972 to 1983. What made MASH so different was its tone. It could be silly one moment and heartbreaking the next. Some episodes made people laugh out loud while others made them cry. The balance between light comedy and serious topics was unusual, and it worked. People cared deeply about the characters. The show didn't shy away from showing the hard truths of war either. Even though it was set during the Korean War, the message often felt very close to what people were feeling during the Vietnam War, which was still going on when the show began. And just when you thought you had the show figured out, things started to change behind the scenes. The faces that made the 4077th so memorable. MASH had a large and colorful cast. At the heart of the show was Alan Alda, who played the funny but deeply caring surgeon, Captain Benjamin Hawkeye Pierce. Alongside him was Wayne Rogers, who played Trapper John McIntyre, another skilled doctor with a sharp sense of humor. These two characters helped shape the early seasons, giving fans someone to root for and laugh with. But they weren't alone. Larry Lynville brought the uptight and often annoying Frank Burns to life, while Loretta Swit played the strong and determined nurse Margaret Hot Lips Houlihan. McLean Stevenson acted as the warm-hearted company commander, Henry Blake. Then there was Gary Berghoff, as Radar O'Reilly, the lovable clerk who somehow always knew what the colonel needed, before he even asked. Other names added to the fun and depth. Jamie Farr played Maxwell Klinger, a soldier who wore dresses in hopes of being sent home. William Christopher was the calm and caring Father Mulcahy, always ready with a kind word. And as the seasons went on, more new faces arrived. When Wayne Rogers left, Mike Farrell stepped in as B.J. Honeycutt. After Stevenson's exit, Harry Morgan came on board as Colonel Sherman Potter. David Ogden Stiers joined later, replacing Lynville as Charles Winchester, another surgeon but with a different kind of attitude. And when Gary Berghoff left, Klinger took over as the company clerk. Even though cast members changed, the show continued to grow. Supporting actors like Kelly Nakahara, Jeff Maxwell, and Alan Arbus kept the world of the 4077th rich and full of life. Each character had a purpose, and each actor brought something special to the screen. Speaking of which, did you know that when MASH began, it was more comedy than drama? The early seasons made people laugh, even though the show was set during a war. That mix of humor and serious moments worked well. But as time passed, things changed behind the scenes, and that changed the show too. MASH started with laughs but slowly changed. Larry Gelbart, one of the original creators and a comedy writer, left the show after season 4. Right after that, Gene Reynolds, another important voice in the show's early funny style, also stepped away. By season 6, MASH had lost most of its original comedy roots. Alan Alda, who played Hawkeye, became one of the new voices of the show, along with producer Burt Metcalf. Under their guidance, the series leaned more into emotional stories. By the time season 8 started, the writing team had been fully replaced. This new team brought deeper and sometimes darker storylines. The shift wasn't just about the writers. Changes in the cast also made a difference. Some of the funnier actors, like McLean Stevenson, Larry Lynville, and Gary Berghoff, had left. Their replacements brought a more serious tone. For example, Wayne Rogers's Trapper John had a wild, playful friendship with Hawkeye. But when Mike Farrell came in as BJ, that friendship felt calmer and more mature. Even Margaret Hot Lips Houlihan changed. She was once tough and sharp, often used for comic effect. But over time, she became softer and more serious. And when Klinger stopped wearing dresses to get out of the army, his character became more grounded. Things were also shifting outside the show. The Vietnam War had ended in 1975. That made the writers focus less on politics and more on personal stories. The change was clear in the episodes that followed. Creative risks and powerful storytelling. As the show moved further from its comedy roots, it began trying new things. The writers took creative risks and broke away from the usual sitcom style. Some episodes looked very different from what viewers were used to. In one episode, Point of View, everything was shown through the eyes of a wounded soldier. It gave viewers a personal, first-hand look at what it felt like to be in a war hospital. Another episode, Dreams, was Alan Alda's idea. It showed each character's dreams during a stressful night full of casualties. Some dreams were soft and sweet, others were dark and frightening. Then, there was A War for All Seasons. This episode followed the 4077th through an entire year, 1951, from spring to winter. It showed how life at the camp changed with each season. In Lifetime, the story played out in real time, minute by minute. A patient's life hung in the balance as the doctors raced against the clock. The show also began using real events from the 1950s as part of the story. The writers and producers did a lot of research. They talked to real surgeons and people who worked at MASH units during the Korean War. Their stories helped make the episodes more real and meaningful. Events from the McCarthy era, big sports stories, and even Marilyn Monroe's fame were written into the episodes. These moments added a touch of history and reminded viewers that the war was real. And those small touches helped the show stay grounded, even when the tone shifted from funny to serious. Time takes its toll behind the scenes. Even though the show stayed popular, it wasn't easy to keep things fresh. By season 9, the cracks started to show. Harry Morgan, who played Colonel Potter, admitted it himself. "The cracks were starting to show," he said honestly. The team had already used most of the real-life stories sent in by doctors who had served in Korea. Many times, a doctor would reach out with an idea, only to find out that the show had already used something similar. Alan Alda also felt the pressure. He believed the show should end with season 10, but CBS had other plans. They convinced him to do one more season, season 11, but with fewer episodes. That way, they could also prepare for a special farewell movie. In the end, season 11 had only 15 episodes, but 6 of those had actually been filmed earlier, during season 10. Then came the big finale, Goodbye, Farewell, and Amen. It wasn't just an episode, it was a 2.5-hour movie, and it broke records. Over 106 million people watched it. It became the most-watched U.S. television broadcast at the time. The very last episode filmed wasn't the finale, though. It was As Time Goes By, which aired just before the movie. But Goodbye, Farewell, and Amen was the big goodbye everyone remembers. And just as the show was about to end, something dramatic happened to the set itself. Something no one saw coming. The set, the fire, and the final goodbye. The 4077th MASH camp was built in 2 main places. The outdoor scenes were filmed in the mountains near Malibu, California. It was a quiet spot, surrounded by nature. This was the same area used in the MASH movie, although they changed the number and position of tents for the TV version. The indoor scenes were shot on Stage 09 at Fox Studios in Century City. Later on, the indoor set was upgraded so that even some outdoor scenes, like nighttime shots, could be filmed there. But scenes that needed the big open space, like the helicopter pad, still had to be done on the outdoor set. Just before filming wrapped up for good, disaster struck. On October 9, 1982, a brush fire tore through the outdoor set. Most of it was destroyed. The team didn't ignore this. Instead, they wrote the fire into the final episode. In the story, bombs caused a forest fire that forced the 4077th to pack up and leave. It became part of their goodbye. Today, the outdoor filming location is called Malibu Creek State Park. It used to belong to 20th Century Fox. Now it's a public park. Some pieces from the show are still there. A rusty Jeep and an old Dodge ambulance can be seen at the site. In 2008, a group of MASH stars, including Mike Farrell, Loretta Swit, and William Christopher, visited the old set to celebrate its partial restoration. A replica of the famous signpost was put back up for fans to see. Many thought the 2018 Woolsey fire had destroyed those remains, but thankfully they survived. The park still honors the show and its impact. Speaking of which, there was even an exhibition called MASH, Binding Up the Wounds at the National Museum of American History. It ran from July 30, 1983 to February 3, 1985. It became one of the most popular displays in the museum's history. In 1 week alone, over 17,000 people visited. The exhibit had the famous swamp and operating room sets. It showed Hawkeye's homemade still, Winchester's tape recorder, and the signpost fans loved. Early script drafts, cast costumes, and even one of the 14 Emmy Awards were all on display. The exhibit also helped people compare the show to the real MASH units during the Korean and Vietnam Wars. It reminded everyone that behind the laughter and the drama were true stories and real people. Over its 11 seasons, MASH saw more than one major character say goodbye. Sometimes it was expected. Sometimes it shocked the fans. And sometimes, the reason behind the exit stirred up headlines. When MASH stars said goodbye. You see, during its 11-year run, MASH saw many big changes, not just in tone or writing, but in the cast itself. While some actors stayed until the very last episode, others decided to leave much earlier. Some wanted to try new roles. Others didn't want to get stuck playing the same type of character. And in some cases, their exits became major moments in television history. Wayne Rogers, who played Captain Trapper John McIntyre, left the show after season 3. He had been one of the main characters alongside Alan Alda's Hawkeye. Their friendship on screen brought a lot of laughs, but when Rogers left, the dynamic of the show changed. He was replaced by Mike Farrell, who played B.J. Honeycutt, a quieter, more serious character. McLean Stevenson also left after season 3. He played Lieutenant Colonel Henry Blake, the kind-hearted commander of the 4077th. His departure wasn't just another character leaving. It became one of the most talked-about episodes in TV history. His final scene was so emotional that many fans were left shocked. Larry Lynville, who played Major Frank Burns, stayed until the end of season 5. And Gary Berghoff, the beloved Radar O'Reilly, left during season 8. These exits didn't happen all at once, but each one changed the feel of the show. Even Harry Morgan, who played Colonel Sherman Potter, eventually stepped away. Though not all of these departures made headlines, some of them left a big mark. And one of them, McLean Stevenson's exit, sparked strong reactions from viewers all over the country. George Morgan. The very first actor to leave MASH was actually someone most viewers wouldn't even remember, George Morgan. He played Father Mulcahy in the pilot episode. Before joining MASH, Morgan had worked on shows like Bonanza and in films such as Putney Swope. But in the MASH pilot, he didn't say a single word. He was just there in the background, mostly used for reaction shots. When the show moved forward, producer Larry Gelbart made a big decision. He replaced Morgan because, as he explained, George Morgan is a perfectly fine actor. We wanted someone who had a quirkier personality, one we wouldn't have to write into the script. So William Christopher stepped in to play Father Mulcahy from that point on. He stayed for the entire series and was even part of the follow-up show AfterMASH. Sadly, George Morgan didn't get many roles after leaving MASH. His final acting credit came in a film in 1990. What's interesting is that even though Morgan was only in one episode, he remained in the opening credits for every episode that followed. It was a small, quiet exit, but it set the stage for bigger ones to come. And none was bigger or more shocking than what happened to Henry Blake. McLean Stevenson. McLean Stevenson played Colonel Henry Blake, the commander of the 4077th. His character was calm, kind, and often let Hawkeye and Trapper get away with their tricks. He also had a special bond with Radar. The two were almost always seen together. Radar always seemed to know what Blake needed, sometimes before he even asked. But behind the scenes, Stevenson was growing unhappy. Even though the show was doing well, he felt limited. He didn't want to stay part of a large cast where he couldn't stand out more. So he made the choice to leave. Writers gave him a strong exit. In the Season 3 finale called Abyssinia Henry, Blake is told he's going home. He says goodbye to the unit and boards a plane, heading back to the US. It felt like a happy ending. But then came the twist. Radar enters the operating room with shocking news. Blake's plane was shot down. No one survived. This moment stunned viewers. It was rare for a TV show, especially a comedy, to kill off a major character. Many people were angry. Some even wrote letters to CBS demanding to know why the ending had to be so tragic. The network later removed that final scene from reruns, but the impact of that moment was huge. It showed that MASH wasn't just a comedy anymore. It could also be serious, bold, and emotional. And in that same episode, fans also saw the end of another major character, one whose exit would come into focus soon after. And this was only the beginning. Other exits were still on the way, and each came with its own story. Wayne Rogers. Wayne Rogers was already a familiar face on television before MASH. He had appeared on shows like Search for Tomorrow and in the film Odds Against Tomorrow, which even got a Golden Globe nomination. So when MASH came along, Rogers didn't audition for the lead role of Hawkeye. Instead, he chose Trapper John because he liked the character's lighter and more cheerful nature. In the beginning, the show was centered around both Trapper and Hawkeye. It was a two-man act, just like in the original movie. But as the series became more popular, Alan Alda's Hawkeye began getting more attention. Over time, the writers gave more focus to Hawkeye's character, and Rogers started to feel left out. He believed that Trapper and Hawkeye were supposed to be equals, not one playing second fiddle to the other. The change didn't sit well with him. Feeling like a sidekick instead of a star, Rogers finally decided to leave the show before Season 4. The producers didn't take it lightly. They were upset and even tried to take legal action, but it turned out that Rogers had never signed his original contract. He had a problem with something called a morals clause in the paperwork. So since he hadn't signed, the producers couldn't stop him from leaving. That's why Trapper John's exit was so sudden. In the first episode of Season 4, viewers were simply told that Trapper had been discharged. There was no farewell scene, no goodbye letter, not even a moment with his best friend, Hawkeye. After MASH, Rogers kept working. He appeared in shows like House Calls and even played a role in the reunion movie I Dream of Jeannie 15 years later. Later, he moved into money management and became a panelist on the Fox Business Network. Wayne Rogers passed away in 2015 due to pneumonia complications. Interestingly, his death came exactly 1 year before fellow cast member William Christopher passed away. But before all that, his quiet departure from MASH had already made a big impact on fans and on the future of the show. Larry Lynville. Larry Lynville played Major Frank Burns, a role that came with high expectations. In the 1970 MASH movie, Frank was played by Robert Duvall, a big name in film. But Lynville stepped in and made the role his own on TV. His version of Frank was uptight, selfish, and always looking to follow the rules. He didn't get along with Hawkeye or Trapper and wasn't liked by most of the unit. The only person who seemed to care for Frank was Margaret Hot Lips Houlihan. Even though Frank was married, they had an ongoing affair, but their romance didn't last. When Margaret got engaged to someone else, it marked the beginning of Frank's downfall. Frank was known for his silly, over-the-top personality. But as MASH started moving toward deeper and more serious stories, his character didn't really fit anymore. Lynville felt that Frank had become too much of a joke. After 5 seasons, he decided it was time to leave. The producers offered to extend his contract by 2 more years, but he turned it down. He wanted to move on from playing the same kind of role over and over again. He also felt the show's new direction didn't leave much room for Frank's kind of humor. In the Season 6 premiere, Frank's exit is explained quickly. After a night of drinking in Seoul, he gets sent back to the United States for a psychiatric evaluation. The rest of the unit isn't exactly sad to see him go. In fact, they're kind of relieved. Larry Lynville later appeared in a short-lived soap opera called Paper Dolls and was part of a special 20th anniversary interview for MASH. During the Memories of MASH special, he joined series creator Larry Gelbart to talk about their time on the show. Lynville had also worked on other popular series like Bonanza, Mission Impossible, and Mannix. He was married 5 times and was survived by his wife, Deborah Guyton, after passing away in 2000 from pneumonia. Even though he left MASH behind, Larry Lynville's role as Frank Burns stayed with fans. He gave the show a villain they loved to hate and left at just the right time before the tone of the show changed too much. The only one who returned from the movie. Gary Berghoff was the only actor from the original MASH movie who returned for the TV series. He played Corporal Walter Radar O'Reilly and stayed on the show from 1972 to 1979. In both the movie and the series, he played the same character, but the Radar we saw on TV was different, softer, more innocent, and much more lovable. Viewers connected with him right away. Radar became a favorite because of how pure and kind he was. He always seemed to know what the commanding officer needed before they even said a word. Berghoff's work didn't go unnoticed either. He was nominated for 6 Emmy Awards. In 1977, he finally won one. His co-star Alan Alda accepted the award on his behalf. But even with all the success, Berghoff started to get tired. The schedule was long and difficult, and it was taking a toll. So he decided it was time to go. It was a big decision. Other actors like McLean Stevenson and Larry Lynville had also left, but their careers didn't go very far after MASH. Berghoff knew this, but still chose to leave in Season 8. And unlike some others, Radar didn't just disappear. His exit was shown on screen, and it left many fans emotional. Gary Berghoff's goodbye hit different. Radar's send-off was one of the most touching moments in the show's history. Unlike Trapper John or Frank Burns, Radar didn't just vanish between episodes. His farewell was given time, care, and emotion. The writers explained his departure with a personal tragedy. His Uncle Ed had passed away, leaving Radar's mother alone on the farm. Colonel Potter understood the situation and gave Radar a hardship discharge so he could go back to Iowa. Originally, Gary Berghoff wanted a big emotional scene. He imagined himself crying hard, something dramatic and intense. He believed that would give his character a strong and powerful exit. But the director, Charles S. Dubin, disagreed. He told Berghoff, "If I were you, I would fight the tears." Berghoff insisted on doing it his way. The director agreed to shoot the scene. But when they watched it later, Berghoff realized it didn't work. He admitted, "I look at the screen and it's awful." He asked for a second chance, and Dubin allowed him to do it again, this time with more control. In the final version, Radar's goodbye was quiet and moving. No over-the-top tears, no big speeches. Instead, he got called away before his farewell party could even start because the choppers arrived with more wounded. That moment captured the reality of war perfectly. Life goes on. Even goodbyes have to wait. Radar's departure felt different than the others. The 4077th had already lost big names, like Colonel Blake, Trapper John, and Frank Burns. But when Radar left, it hit hard. Radar was the glue of the camp. He knew how everything worked. He handled the day-to-day problems. He was the one who kept things moving. In fact, just before he left, the camp fell apart because no one else could figure out all the small details he used to take care of. Beyond that, Radar was the heart of the unit. He was young, hopeful, and often a little naive. But that innocence kept the team grounded. When things got too dark or serious, Radar brought light. His spirit lifted morale. His simple ways reminded everyone of home. That's why his goodbye hurt. Not just because he left, but because the camp would never feel the same again. It was a clear message. Even the best people have to leave sometimes. Berghoff later returned briefly in a follow-up show called AfterMASH, and even had a pilot for a solo spin-off called Walter, where Radar became a police officer. But that show didn't go past the pilot episode. Still, Radar's role in MASH remained unforgettable. Life after MASH wasn't what they hoped for. For many of the actors who left MASH, life after the show wasn't easy. McLean Stevenson, who played Henry Blake, once said, "The mistake was not in leaving. The mistake was that I thought everybody in America loved McLean Stevenson. That was not the case. Everybody loved Henry Blake." After leaving the show, Stevenson appeared in guest roles and even hosted The Tonight Show. but his career never reached the same level again. Wayne Rogers, who left as Trapper John, also faced some setbacks. Because he left without signing his contract, he was never invited back into the MASH world. When a spin-off called Trapper John Maryland was made, the role was given to a different actor, Pernell Roberts. Rogers did go on to star in House Calls, but like the others, his roles became smaller and more scattered over time. Larry Lynville, who played Frank Burns, left because he felt his character no longer fit the tone of the show. He had a few guest roles in TV and minor films afterward, but nothing that matched the fame he had earned from MASH. And even Gary Berghoff, despite his deep connection with fans, didn't find major success after his exit. He mostly showed up on game shows like Match Game and Hollywood Squares, and had a few guest appearances in shows like Wonder Woman and Fantasy Island. George Morgan, who only played Father Mulcahy in the pilot, had the shortest and most quiet career after MASH. He only landed 2 more roles after that. It's clear that MASH was the high point for many of these actors. Their roles were unforgettable, but stepping away from the show came with risks. And for most of them, those risks didn't pay off the way they'd hoped. Which MASH character's exit hit you the hardest, and why? Do you think the show should have ended after Radar left, or did it still hold its magic till the finale? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more incredible stories from Hollywood's fascinating history. See you next time.